what exactly is the content likely to be? Well, from the Democrats, what you're likely to hear is how terrified they personally were, and also all of their other arguments, which is that the riots were white supremacy, Trump is a white supremacist. You're likely to hear about how close we were to losing our democracy. In the words of Representative Jackie Speier from California, Democrat, she says, we have to hear during this trial how close we were to losing our democracy. Now, let's be frank about this. We were not close to losing our democracy. We weren't. I mean, we just weren't. As a factual matter, a bunch of yahoos, idiot criminal yahoos, evil yahoos, running into the Capitol building and putting their feet on Nancy Pelosi's desk. It's ugly and it's terrible and it's bad and it's horrible for the country. That was not us being close to losing our democracy. You know what losing a democracy looks like? It sort of looks like what happens in countries all over the world when the military just marches into presidential palaces and starts arresting officials, right? That's what it looks like. At no point was this a coup. A coup is not a bunch of idiots dressed in buffalo horns running into a government building and sitting in somebody's chair. That is not a coup. By the way, it's not even a coup if somebody goes and tries to murder members of Congress. That is an act of evil, a criminal act of evil. Okay, by the way, we've seen it before. Okay, it is not even a coup when, God forbid, a president is assassinated. We've had that in American history before. That's not a coup either. A coup, specifically speaking, is when one regime is exchanged for a more legitimate regime through the mechanisms of institutional power generally, right? That's when you have the military that intervenes on the behest of one political party, for example, and then ousts a sitting democratically elected person, for example. That is the nature of a coup. This was not a coup. We were not close to losing our democracy. How not close were we to losing our democracy? Within hours of these morons jumping into the Capitol building to make trouble and videotape themselves for their Instagram. Congress was back in session, ratifying the election and making Joe Biden the president of the United States. So yeah, we were not close to a coup. But again, the lie has, what's amazing is that you don't actually have to do this. I mean, seriously, Democrats don't have to do this. I said this the day of. This could have been a unifying moment that lies are bad and people believing lies is really bad. And people then acting on those lies to do violent and terrible damage is really, really bad. We can all be on the same side of all those questions. But instead it's, well, Donald Trump tried to launch a coup and he was barely thwarted. No, he wasn't. He was not barely thwarted. You know how I know he wasn't barely thwarted? Because on January 20th, he didn't attend the inauguration and Joe Biden became president of the United States. So that's how I know he wasn't barely thwarted. It's just, the exaggeration is unnecessary. And it really does demonstrate that what this really is about for a lot of folks, as always, is the PR. Right? We have a Congress that doesn't actually do anything for a living. We have a Congress that tweets things and goes on cable news. They have the same job that I do, except that I'm not paid by taxpayer money. Nor am I your elected representative, right? We have a Congress that does not pass bills. We have a Congress that does not negotiate. We have a Congress that does nothing, except every once in a while, they vote on some giant omnibus spending package. They toss all power over to the executive branch. A bunch of unelected bureaucrats govern your life. And then Congress goes on Twitter and talks jack about other people. That's pretty much what Congress does for a living these days. So here's Jackie Speier doing just that. Again, there's no wonder why people hate the American legislature. There's a reason. The legislature does not legislate. Our elected officials do not represent us. All they do all day long is just yell on cable news for power. It's pretty crazy.
I intend to, like so many of my colleagues, to put into words that every American can hear for decades to come how close we came to losing our democracy. This is a man that intended to overtake this government. And it's astonishing to me that so few of my colleagues on the Republican side, even after witnessing that, even after being part of that insurrection, are unwilling to do their jobs and protect the Constitution and protect the democracy.
Okay, again, the democracy was not under threat. Okay, there were people who were threatening to do bad things. At no point was the institutional democracy of the United States under threat. To pretend otherwise is to ignore the realities on the ground. The military would not have participated in anything like that. Republican members of Congress voted to ratify the election. Vice President Pence was the vice president under Donald Trump, lest we forget. He was the person leading the ratification. Mitch McConnell was the head of the Senate. Like, all of this overwrought hysteria is, in fact, overwrought hysteria. I'm not saying it's hysteria to have been worried or concerned or freaked out at what happened at the Capitol. It is overwrought hysteria to say that America was on the brink of turning into a dictatorship on January 6th. That's just silly. It's silly. On its face, it's silly. In just a second, we're going to get to more silly because, again, this is really not about anything to do with Trump. It's really just about the PR that you can use in order to foment your own rise to power in the future via social media. I hope you enjoyed that clip from The Ben Shapiro Show. If you did, go ahead and hit the subscribe button so you stay up to date on all of our future content.